What's up, Southside Youth? Pastor Dalton here at both the Redstone and Commerce campus. Middle school students, hope you had a great week. I hope school was really good. I hope all the sporting events you were a part of were great. I hope your teams won. If they didn't, it's okay. You could high five somebody in the room and say it's gonna be all right, unless you lost like 44-0. Then you just stink. No, I'm just kidding. You're fine. But hey, we are so glad you're here at church today at Southside, at either of the two campuses. We hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great week. I'm excited today because we're going to be back in our series, Know God. We've been working through this series all about knowing God personally, but also hearing stories in the Bible that tell us how people came to know God. And today is not going to be any different. We're actually going to be today in Mark chapter 5. It's an awesome story. I think we can learn a lot from it. But today I want you to hear this. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus is doing some ministry around the Sea of Galilee. It's in the middle of Israel, and he's just walking around doing some different ministry. We see him coming from one miracle to another. He's on one side of the Galilee doing a miracle. He's pulling demons out of somebody. They go into pigs. They jump off a cliff. Crazy story. If you want to read it, it's at the beginning of Mark 5. But then he takes a 2-hour trip across the sea. And as soon as he gets on in chapter 5, we see as soon as he gets to the other side, he steps off the boat and a crowd is already waiting. Have you ever been so excited about hearing somebody's in town that you like drive to go see them? Even just a glimpse in your mind would be the coolest thing. Well, that's exactly what this crowd is doing. They're so excited that Jesus is in town that they just had to come see about this man that everyone has been talking about. And in this moment, he gets out of the boat, a crowd is there, everything's crazy. A man comes down and he falls at Jesus' feet. This man, though, wasn't a normal man. His name is Jairus, and he was one of the synagogue leaders in town. AKA, he was kind of like a pastor for the Jewish church in that town, which is called a synagogue. So Jairus falls down at his feet and he says, Jesus, my daughter is dying. If only you would lay your hands on her, she would be healed. So Jesus starts following this man. And as the crowd is coming, they're all crouching in on Jesus. They're all getting so close to Jesus. And as the crowd is moving towards Jairus' house, a woman from the back of the crowd starts making her way through. And in the midst of all of this, she's thinking, man, I just gotta be close to Jesus. Now here's why. In Mark chapter 5, the Bible tells us that this woman was struggling with a medical condition. She had been bleeding for a long time. And Mark even goes on to tell us that she had sought out all the medical help she could. She'd gone to doctor after doctor. She'd literally used every single amount of money that she had, and it didn't matter. If anything, the Bible tells us it actually made the bleeding worse. Can you imagine the struggle this woman had? So here she is. She's working her way through the crowd. She's almost like swimming, trying to get through. I would love to see like an overhead view of this. Just like you see a crowd, you see Jesus, everyone's tied on him. And you just see this lady working her way slowly through. And in her mind, the Bible tells us she's thinking, if only I could touch Jesus, I would be healed. This woman had tried everything. And in the midst of this, she hears about Jesus and says, he must be the reason. He must be the answer to the problem I have, the fix for my brokenness. So she comes through and she touches his robe, and all of a sudden she's healed and she knows it. Can you imagine how that felt? She comes to know Jesus in that moment. And here he is. He feels, the Bible tells us, and I'm not really sure how this works. I don't know how God works in this way, but Jesus feels the power come out of him. He turns around and he stops in the middle of this giant crowd. And he says, who touched me? Can you imagine being one of the people that was really trying to get close to Jesus in the crowd as they're making their way to Jairus' house? Can you imagine being one of those people, and in that moment when Jesus says, who touched me, being like, oh, no, not me. What? That wasn't me. I didn't touch you, Jesus. But here he is. Jesus turns around and he says, who touched me? And the crazier thing to me, the disciples who had been with Jesus time after time, who had seen him do miracles day after day, they said, what do you mean, Jesus? Everyone's touched you. You're in a crowd. Come on, man. But Jesus ignores them. And Jesus says, who touched me? And with fear and trembling, this woman comes forward. She says, Lord, I did. And she tells him what she was thinking and what she had did. And Jesus, he looks at her and says, because of this, your faith has saved you. Now go, be free of your affliction. You see, Jesus, in this moment, not only heals her physically, but he came for something bigger. You see, Jesus, when we know him, he comes for something so much bigger than any of this. He comes for our salvation, a spiritual healing. Not just this physical healing, not just our mental and emotional needs. Jesus came for something far greater than this. And in this moment, he says, lady, your faith has saved you. In your story, think about your life. Do you know God? In your brokenness, have you tried to fill it with all kinds of things? Have you sought help in some good ways for things like her? She sought out doctors. That's not a bad thing, right? But in the end, nothing this earth had to offer would heal what she needed. It wasn't healing from her blood. It was a spiritual salvation that she needed. She needed to be reconnected to God in a relationship. And the only way she could do that is through Jesus. The healing of her blood and her medical condition was just a plus. She was now eternally healed through the Son of Jesus. So this story, in that moment, it gets crazier. I love how Mark does this. He creates these sandwiches. He starts with the story, and then in an ADHD moment, he switches, he adds some spice, and then he goes back to the original story. It's awesome. So Mark, he goes from Jairus and Jesus following the crowd to this woman, and now he's continuing with Jairus' story. So they go to Jairus' house, and in the middle of all of this, they go to the house, they go inside, a couple of the disciples with Jesus, Jairus, and his wife, and people are crying. And she has died, the daughter. And Jesus looks at them and he goes, why are you crying? She's not dead, she's asleep. And they laugh at him. And he sends them outside and he goes in, and I love this. He says these words, Talita cum. Little girl, get up. And in this moment, she gets up and she starts to walk. So many people in this story have come to know Jesus in so many different ways. Some out of desperation, some out of great need. Some because they've tried everything and they just can't seem to find the answer in anything on the earth. But God provided a way. He provided Jesus, his perfect son, so that you and I can have a relationship with him. I don't know what you're going through today. It could be all kinds of things. But what I want you to hear from today's message is this: that today you can know God. You can know God through his son, Jesus. Today, we're going to read Mark chapter 5 in small group, and I just want you to look at those questions that you have and ask yourself, do you know God? Do you relate to any of the people in the story we said today and we read about? How can you grow deeper in your faith? Hey guys, I love you. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week here at Southside.